Uh-oh. Got it. Good evening and welcome to tonight's show. I'm your host, Tina Dawson, the owner of True Blue Designs, and it is truly an honor to be before you. Please like and share and let everyone know that we are on the air. We are streaming live on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel at True Blue Designs Presents the Inside Perspective. Now, before we begin with tonight's guest, I just want to send heartfelt condolences to the family members, friends, and the school of the University of Virginia. Most of you know that there was a senseless shooting this weekend, and I just want to send my heartfelt condolences to everyone attached to that shooting and ask you to keep them in your prayers. Now, tonight's guest is the principal and chief evangelist of Tony Bolden Enterprises, LLC, a consultancy that provides personal and leadership brand development. He is also the author of the book, The 9 Signs of Effective Leadership. Now, again, I'm going to invite you to like, share, and invite others to tune in and be inspired by tonight's guest. Please help me give a warm welcome to Dr. Tony Bolden. There we are.
Just waiting when I can come off mute. Okay, I'm good.
We got it. Thank you so much, Dr. Bolden, for being on tonight's show. Can you hear me?
Hold on, I got a lag. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I got you. Can you hear me?
Thank you so much for saying yes and being on tonight's show.
Thank you for inviting me. I know people who've been on this show.
Okay.
I've seen previous interviews. I never would have thought that I would get a chance to do it. So I'm excited. Thank you for having me. The rest of this is gravy. We can end it now.
No, we have a lot to share. Look, before we went live, we were talking so much we almost missed the time.
I thought that was the interview.
We have a lot in common. It's amazing what you find out when you just communicate with people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to let you start off the interview by just telling the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Okay, let me give you the condensed version. So I'm Tony Bolden. I am originally from Chicago. Shout out to all the Chicagoans watching this, like legitimate Chicago, not the suburbs. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. You have to use that disclaimer because everybody's from Chicago, and then you find out it was all the surrounding areas. But born and raised on the far south side of Chicago. I am the youngest of 5 children. I have an older brother and 3 sisters. And I live in suburban Atlanta. I am married to a beautiful wife who is also a doctor, and 2 beautiful daughters. I don't have any sons, which is why I have all this. And so, I've done some things professionally, I guess we'll get into, but I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I'm going to let you guide me as to where you want to hear, because otherwise that's the interview, my background. So.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your journey to creating Tony Bolden Enterprises.
Sure. And so the business kind of created itself, right? I formalized it over time, but it kind of created itself based on my experiences. I have been in sales my entire professional career, over 30 years. And so I've always been in sales in the what we used to call human capital management field, right? Talent management, talent development, learning, succession, performance management, that kind of stuff. So I've always done that. I've always sold services. I've facilitated in those services and so much more. And going back 20 plus years ago, I always thought, maybe I could be a motivational speaker because I thought that's what it meant to convey information. And I found out I'm actually more corporate. That I it's not just motivating people, it's really providing information that people can use. And so the business kind of grew out of me just speaking, and then speaking and writing, and then speaking, writing, and training. And it's had these different iterative forms. And then as I got more education and learned how to be better at what I do in general, I decided to kind of formalize it. So really, Tony Bolden Enterprises within the last year became what it looks like now. It was some version of it for the past 20 some odd years with me just kind of, traveling around the country with my bag, with anybody who let me speak or facilitate or share. So that's it. And it's an advisory services firm. I always like to tell people I'm not a coach necessarily. I don't have coaching clients, but I do a lot of coaching. So it's speaking, it's training, and I only focus on leadership development and personal branding. That's all that I focus on, and I work with folks and kind of identifying who they are and what they want to represent and how to be better at what they're looking to accomplish.
So when you when you have corporate clients, or do you speak to the leadership in the corporate client, or is it the staff going into leadership, or both?
Yes. Okay. Yes to all of it. Typically people bring you in for their staff because leaders don't, want to tell you that they need help.
It's true.
But ultimately they kind of get those nuggets. And I've had a lot of leaders reaching out to me directly who I don't know, who've never heard me speak or anything, but just based on, some articles I may post or things that I've done and that they've heard that I've done in the past, I speak more directly to. And I think that's my strength as a non-coaching coach, is really just trying to get people to kind of figure out where they are based on what they've been through. You and I talked about this before. All of us have a pathology, right? We're all the sum of our experiences. And so once you kind of unpack that, it kind of helps people realize, okay, this is how I developed this gap from where I am and to where I want to be. And it didn't just appear, right? It's based on some of the things that I've experienced or didn't experience, et cetera, et cetera. So my ability to I'm a very simple person. I'm a very process-oriented, linear. A comes after B, right? And so we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. B comes after A, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I present information, it's in a very basic, linear, simple way. And I think people appreciate that and are more apt to hear, because I'm not trying to fix you or change you. I'm just sharing information the way that I understand it and trying to get some insight there based on your perspective as well.
And sometimes it's easier for people to grasp the knowledge that you're trying to give them when you do break it down,
Absolutely. Yeah. I can agree with that.
Yeah, I'm visual and auditory. So you can tell me how to do something, but it's best if you tell me and then show me. I get it quicker than
Same.
Tell me.
Same. I'm action oriented. I'm results driven, right? So words, it's like, okay, I get it the first time, but I need to see it, and I'm tactile. I need to be involved in it as well, so that I can develop my way of doing it and making it more efficient. Because again, I'm process oriented and I'm linear, so I've got to get into it and make it the way that I understand it so that it works. But action oriented, absolutely.
Simple is best.
That's what we say.
Now, you are the author of the 9 Signs of Effective Leadership. So let's talk a little bit about how the thought of putting the book together came about. And is it self-published? Did you go with a company? Let's talk a little bit about that.
It is self-published. Just because I figured I can do it on my own versus trying to sell somebody on the idea of publishing a book for me. So thankfully we live in an era where you can do this on your own. So it is a self-published book, and it was born out of my experiences in the corporate world, just in my interactions with leaders, right? So just to step back a little bit on my life journey, you and I talked about this before. I skipped a couple of grades I'm from Chicago. We called it grammar school. You all call it elementary and middle. But I skipped 2 grades in grammar school. So I got to high school early. I was 12 when I got to high school. I graduated high school when I was 15. My birthday is in the summer. So I graduated high school when I was 15. I turned 16 as a freshman in college. And so you would think, oh, great, you're going to be you slayed this academic thing, right? And so you're just on a path to, and that's not the way it worked out for me. So I ended up having to leave University of Kansas because I wasn't applying myself and doing what I was supposed to be doing. And so I got my formal education later in life. I went back to school to get my undergraduate and my master's and then my doctorate. And so I learned a lot of things during that process, particularly when it comes to leadership. And just observing. I'm a very observant person. And again, because I'm very process oriented, I see you doing something. Right. I figure out how that makes sense to me, and I try to adapt that into the way that I lead other people.
Mhm.
And so I've been blessed to be able to interact with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, sales leaders, et cetera, all these years. And I started to see these themes that were emerging in the way that they led other people, either successfully or unsuccessfully. Sometimes you learn what not to do by watching people too.
That's true.
And so when I went back to get my MBA, I have an MBA in organizational psychology and development. All that is just, if you think about psychology within an organization, within a business structure, that's all that MBA is. So that taught me how to really deal with the folks that are within a business. What are the things, again, talk about pathology. What is it that they bring to the table, and how can you maximize and leverage their talent for the benefit of the organization? Then my doctorate is in organizational leadership. So once I got that schooling and learned how to really apply research and methodology to it, I said, well, let me go back and revisit this stuff I wrote, because I wrote the book originally, oh God, in the mid 2000s, probably. The framework of the book.
Okay.
Just for myself. So it was there. But after I got the formal education, I went back and applied the theory and the science behind that, and really put some things in. And you've seen the book, right? So it's stories, but then I'm referencing articles, I'm referencing research, I'm referencing things to bolster the concepts around leadership that I uncovered there. And so it just became kind of one of those things where if I'm talking to all these people, and for my doctorate, I actually interviewed these folks to dissect that information, to figure out what are those, and I'm gonna give you a doctoral word here. What are the congruent competencies, right? What are some of the things that all these people who are very different across gender, across age, across color, et cetera, education, what are some of these things that they all shared in common? And so those are the things that I focused on. So I distill that into what I call those 9 signs that I saw present in every effective leader that I have an opportunity to interview. And that's the summation of the book.
You know, I've had quite a few authors on the show, and you know, a lot of them say that we all have a book in us, right?
Yes.
If someone wants to draw that book out of them, what is some advice would you give them?
Write, and then take a break from writing and write some more. Take another break and write some more, right? I never wrote this book as a manifesto to the world. I never set out to write a book to say I'm going to change the world with this book. I wrote the book because I wanted to capture some information that I was finding and that I was processing. And so even when I put the science behind it, it was to validate some things that I'd learned, or to unlearn some things that I thought that I knew. And the book just started with me just giving it away to friends. So, you know, I've been able to make a good living off of it, but you know, every time I speak, I give the book away. So if you buy it, great. If not, you'll still get a copy probably anyway. So I tell folks, what is the motivation behind you sharing the information that you want to share? Is it because you've learned something and hey, I want to tell you about something that I've learned? Right. Or if you set it out, same with a business. Do you start a business? Do you start anything for the financial reward, for the adulation of folks that you may not know or know? What is the motivation behind whatever you do? And then find a way to integrate that into your daily life. I've written peer-reviewed articles. You know, I've contributed to journals. I've contributed to other people's publications, etc., because I just enjoy writing. And so I just like to get it out on paper and make it make sense, because I like to read. So I write the way that I like to read. I'm pretty snarky. You know, I can be condescending and jokey and all that. So I just like to present information the same way that I like to present it. So if you have a book idea, and everybody does, then just write. Just write it out, and it'll develop itself. The audience, the folks who are going to benefit from the information that you share will come, but just get it out of you, and just commit to doing something like that every day to get it out of you.
Right. And that's the first step. Just get it on paper. Don't try to make it pretty, because that comes down the line. You know, a lot of the guests just write and worry about the formality later. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. You talked a little bit about personal brand development. Can you define a little bit what that is and discuss its importance?
Sure. So what I focus on is personal branding, and I focus on it because it intrigued me when I learned about it 20 something years ago as well. I have some folks within my circle who are corporate marketing executives, one of which is probably watching now, who know this stuff. They have, formal education in marketing. They know different colorways and all. They know all about that. I seized on the people development aspect of personal branding because I saw how that makes sense to me. I read an article there's a magazine out there that's still out there now called Fast Company Magazine.
Mhm.
And there was an article by a gentleman by the name of Tom Peters. And the article's name was The Brand Called You. And Peters really said the summation of the article was you and me, we're a brand. Every one of us is a brand. Now, this was written back in 1997. When this wasn't now, you say everybody knows a brand. You can go on Instagram, everybody's an influencer, everybody knows their brand.
Right.
In the 90s, it was like, what? So Peterson wrote an article and he detailed about every one of us as a product. And as such, we are CEOs of Me Incorporated. So once you kind of put a human element to the concept of branding and marketing, then it starts to sink in. Oh, okay. So I'm developing myself as a product.
Right.
I'm developing an audience. I'm creating value, et cetera, et cetera. And so I seized on that. And then again, as I started to dig deeper into leadership development and some of the science around leaders, then I kind of came up with this concept around the leader's brand, in that we all have a brand, particularly as leaders. And whether you cultivate your brand or not, it's being cultivated. So I've had people tell me, I'm not into that. I'm not trying to get a job, because we always equate it to an activity. I'm
Right.
branding myself because I want to sell something. I'm branding myself because I'm trying to get a position. I'm branding myself. No, you're branded just by existing. And if you don't take control of that narrative, then somebody else is developing your brand for you and you don't have any control over it.
Right.
And that's just by the way that people see you. So when I talk about it from the perspective of, what are the attributes of a brand that you can apply to yourself? And so when you think about a brand, right, a brand is just, by definition, brand is just a symbol. It's just a
Mhm.
mark. It's just the technical definition is a symbol that distinguishes one thing from another.
Okay.
That's all a brand is. And branding is when you attribute value to that
Mhm.
symbol that
Mhm.
distinguishes itself, right? So when you think about that, you're a brand. There's something about you that's different than other people around you.
Right.
And you're branded when somebody attributes certain characteristics or attributes of your characteristics that tell the story of your brand. And
Right.
so that's all. Now, when you get deeper into it about, we're products, right? Every product was created for a reason.
Mhm.
Every person is created for a purpose. We're all created for, I believe in divine prominence, right? In providence. I believe that we are all here for a reason. We didn't just show up. So whatever that purpose is, that's a core existence of who you are. I also talk about, when I get into my workshops, I talk about vision and mission. Every product, every organization has a vision. You can go on anybody's website and see what their vision statement is for Coca-Cola, for the Home Depot, for the Atlanta Braves, whatever.
Right.
Every organization, every entity has a vision. And every entity also has a mission. So the vision is just that desired state, right? I just want to be fill in the blank. That's my vision. The mission is, what do I have to do in order to make that vision come to pass? So the mission is the mission statement, right? And
Mhm.
so as a product, as a brand, I have a purpose, I have a vision. There's a reason that this brand exists, and that there's a mission. There's things that have to be accomplished with this brand in order for that vision to be deemed as successful. It's the same for us.
Right.
I'll take a break. I'll give you the three attributes, and I'll stop talking because I told you I'm from Chicago. I can do this all day. I'm actually talking slower than I thought I would.
But let me chime in on this, because I think what you said is so important about personal brand. When you were talking, the first thing that came to my mind is job interviews.
Right.
Because
Right.
when you go to interview, you are your brand, right? And
Absolutely.
you
Yep.
said that, I think you said that the definition of the brand is something that uh, differentiates themselves from one thing to from another, right? So when you go
Exactly.
into a job interview, you're trying to present yourself and present your brand to differentiate yourself from the next candidate. And I think
Absolutely.
that I've heard so many times, Dr. Bolden, that people will say, I went to this particular, this is a good question I'm gonna ask you. So say the young person says, well, I went to this interview and I have all the qualities, but I just don't know why they didn't pick me. And then it seems like in 2022, the topic of their brand is kind of like a sensitive topic, right? Because, a part of your brand is the appearance, right? And then,
True.
it's how
True.
you present yourself. So when you're talking about personal brand and you're talking to the younger generation, I'm sure you have, how do you convey that message to the younger generation?
Couple of things. You're right. I have the opportunity now, even in my, because I still do my corporate job, right? And so I have the opportunity to mentor a lot of young professionals new to the corporate arena, and so branding is a big thing now. And I've also had the opportunity to work in some areas around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, to help organizations see, okay, you can't just talk about branding, right? You have to be able to see people, hear people as they present them in their authentic selves, right? We can't just put people in a box and say, okay, I only see this way. So when you're talking with corporations about being open to giving folks who don't look like them opportunities, then you talk to the people who don't look like them about their brand. So I always go in about vision, mission, and purpose. That's the first thing I say. But when anybody, if you're watching this and you know me, you're probably rolling your eyes because you knew I was going to start talking about vision, mission, and purpose, because that's the core foundation. If you don't have an idea of what that is, then you're wasting your time. Then you're really spinning your wheels because you don't have an anchor. When you don't have an anchor in solid foundation, then you become all things to all people. And that's not necessarily the best thing that you can do for your brand. So once you have at least an inkling of what your vision and mission should be or what you want it to be, then it gives you that you understand the concept around, okay, so what is it about me that makes me unique? What about me makes me different from the next person? And fortunately, these days, young people get it. It's the older folks who are now kind of wrestling them into a headlock around, no, this is important. Young people get it. Young people get it so much that when they go into organizations, they're interviewing the organization as to whether or not I should be investing my time in you. We're in this economy now when, my short young corporate career, it was a sin to be any place for less than a year. To be in any job for less than 2 years, excuse me. If you were at a place for a year and you left, you were considered a job hopper and it was taboo. These days, young people have been able to brand that to, I'm getting experience. I'm bringing my talent, my gift, and my abilities to an organization. I'm lending them to you for a period of time. I learn what I need to learn while I'm there, and then I take my talents and I go someplace else. And they're recruited as such. Before, recruiters wouldn't touch you if you hadn't been someplace for 2 years, et cetera, et cetera. Now, recruiters are recruiting these folks, this generation, for 6-month gigs. So the mentality, the perspective has changed a little bit. But at the core of what you asked me, I'll get right back to where I left off.
Okay.
There's 3 attributes of a successful brand, right? When we think about a successful brand, these 3 things are evident within those brands. Number 1, are you recognizable? Is a successful brand is successful because we recognize it? Okay. I could be anywhere in the world. When I see that logo, I know what that brand is. So I always ask folks.
Yeah.
I tell the Chick-fil-A story again. People here know that we don't have the time. People know that I love Chick-fil-A, and I've done enough workshops where people know my talking about Jesus chicken and everything. So I won't go down that road. But in a good way. I mean, I love it. I love Chick-fil-A. But you get my point. When you think of Coca-Cola, when you think of Mercedes-Benz, when you think of whatever, you automatically recognize that symbol. And immediately in your mind, you can see the outline of the symbol. It's that recognizable. Right. As an individual, how are you making yourself recognizable? What is it about you that distinguishes you from the next person? What distinguishes you from the person who's applying for your job? And so we unpack that. And then the next thing is, not only are you recognizable, but you are a promise of value. Successful brands are a promise of value. You solicit the stores that you go to, you drive the cars that you drive, you use the products that you use because you recognize them, and they're a promise of value. They never let you down. And if they did let you down, then the manufacturer made sure that you were made whole. If you had a bad meal at fill in the blank restaurant, you told somebody, they took care of you. It was a promise of value. There was some quid pro quo there. So what are you doing as an individual to be a promise of value to the people that you interact with? What is it that you bring to the table that when they think of you, right? When I think of the Coca-Cola, and I see the symbol in my mind, I think of many things. When someone thinks of me, what do they think of? Is it good or is it bad? And is am I a promise of value attached to that? And then the final attribute is do you inspire trust or loyalty? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that symbol, I recognize that symbol, I patronize that symbol because I know that they're going to give me consistent value. And because I know that I'm going to get what I came for, they have earned my loyalty and my trust. So no matter where I am in the world, I'm going to make sure that I patronize that brand, that product, that service, because it's that reciprocal relationship. I recognize them. I know that they do what they say they're going to do. And as such, I'm going to give them my loyalty. What is it about you that inspires the folks around you to give you their trust and their loyalty based on the brand attributes that you bring to the table? And so once you have that understanding, then you start to think about yourself almost in third person, right? You kind of step outside of yourself a little bit and say, okay, so when people say my name in a room where I don't know anybody and nobody knows me, but they say my name, what are the attributes that are speaking for me when I'm not there? And that's why I say it's important that you have a brand. If you never heard me say that, understand that somebody somewhere is looking at you to see if you're recognizable, you are a promise of value, and you inspire trust and loyalty. So your brand is doing something without your consent, if you will, or without you taking control of it. So it's important that we understand it. We control our narrative, and it helps us develop as well. So again, young people, this is, when I started talking about this in 1999 and 2000, it was like, I sound like I was a prophet because it was, oh wow, personal. Nowadays, it's like, yeah, get in line, sir. I'm of an influencer. This is my brand. Or I've had young people tell me, that's off brand for me. And that's another thing. When you know what your brand is, then it goes right back to your vision and your mission. Once I know what my brand is and I'm operating in my brand, then I'm not going to step outside of that brand because I don't have any expertise or experience I can't be recognizable. I can't create trust or loyalty outside of my box. I know leadership and I know personal branding. Don't come to me asking about accounting, right? Or budgeting or anything. I know how to help make people better. And so young people will tell me that's not in my brand. They want me to do something that's not in my brand. How do I coach my boss to kind of steer that back into my wheelhouse? So folks get it. They get it now.
Wow. Yeah, because like you said, if you don't create, and if you don't create and nurture and find out what your brand is, then society kind of tells you
they're going to do
what
it for
you. Yeah,
absolutely. And then we chase this persona that we didn't craft. That is not our vision, not our mission, not our purpose,
not us at all.
And we're not going to be successful.
It's not us at all. Yeah, and I think you have to spend quality time, with yourself, and to really, and it takes time to finally get there. You don't get there overnight, but when you do,
you're as the old folks say, you were steadfast and unmovable at that point. Once you get to that place,
it's a blessing when you know your value, and
absolutely.
What you said earlier, when you know your purpose. It's just such a wonderful feeling. It's like the light bulb goes off.
It's freeing because the opportunities that come my way now I can honestly, when I get opportunities to speak or share or do whatever, the first thing I go to is, does that fit within my brand? Are they asking me to do something that I could provide value to based on my experience, based on my pathology, like we talked about before, right? Versus just it's a gig, to be able to say I did a gig that has nothing to do with my brand or my value. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I know my purpose. And it took me a while to know that. And when that light bulb comes on, I know it. And I'm very comfortable in operating within my purpose.
You in your bio, you said that you're an organizational behaviorist. Can you explain a little bit what that is and
yeah, absolutely.
Purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. That just means I'm nosy. I mean, I have a no. As I alluded to earlier, so my MBA is in organizational psychology and development, right? And so that all that deals with is the humans that work within an organization, and just the study of humans within an organization. That's it. And so oftentimes you've heard the term like industrial organizational psychologists, IO psychologists, consultants, those, it's the psychology of business really. And so I just observe folks. I learn, right? I share information. I gather information from folks within the setting of an organization. And so it's all about, when you think of a business, the goal of a business is to achieve the business's goal, whatever those operational goals are, right? Financial resources, return on investment for the shareholders, to develop product services, whatever. The business exists for a reason, right? As a purpose. So the people within the business are there to help the business achieve those organizational and operational goals. So organizational behavior just helps you to determine how to help those people do their jobs the best so that they can achieve those organizational goals. That's all.
Let me ask you a quick question, because and you touched on this, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Years ago, not one company had a department that had that in it. Then all of a sudden, now everybody has. Can you touch a little bit on how that came about and the importance of these companies having this department?
Absolutely. It started out as affirmative action departments, right? Or just being aware of some things that we couldn't. And now the law helped, because laws across all 50 states around harassment and workplace, aggression, those kinds of things kind of helped frame what you should be doing organizationally. But not probably within the last 10 years or so, organizations really started to dedicate some resources around, I'll say, I'm doing air quotes, around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Within the last 5 years, it really became more strategic initiatives. And this is the benefit that I've had being in corporate. I've always been in the HR space within the corporate arena, right? And so I've been around HR folks all of my professional career. And back in the day, HR never had a seat at the table strategically. In any organization, you have finance, you have sales and marketing, you have operations, all that stuff, and then you have HR. And HR was always seen as the cat herders, right? They were always seen as the people that were taking care of the people, making sure that the coffee machine had coffee in it, that everybody's benefits were on time, payroll, all that stuff. But they were never looked at as operational executives to help the business achieve its objectives and goals. Within the last 10 years, that changed. HR was always saying, we want a seat at the table. We want a seat at the table. We want a seat at the table. So companies gave them a seat at the table, but they still just expected them to deal with the people issues within an organization. Within the last 5 or so years, HR really began to not only have a seat at the table, but be responsible for some of these strategic initiatives around diversity, equity. And all strategy means is that tied to the way that we make money? Is that tied to the way that we stay out of trouble, etc.? So fine, then I need you to be responsible for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and making sure that everybody who comes into this place and works for us, their voices are heard and their faces are seen. That's what I tell folks. That's what diversity and equity inclusion is. You want to make sure that everyone within the enterprise, their voices are heard and their faces are seen. And whatever marginalized group or group that they represent, and there's so much intersectionality, right, between women in the workplace, Black people in the workplace, Black women in the workplace, gay and lesbian, Black gay and lesbian women in the workplace.
That's right.
Black, gay, lesbian, disabled people in the workplace, working parents. And so organizations have developed these employee resource groups or groups within the company to say, okay, not only are you important to us, but we want you to form a group within the company of folks who identify like you, so that you have that additional sense or that additional layer of support, protection, et cetera, et cetera. So you have, Black employee resource groups, you have gay and lesbian resource groups, you have disabled employee resource groups, et cetera. So these days, organizations just trying to figure out a way that we recognize that when folks come to work for us, they're bringing their whole selves to the organization. And so how can we support you when you come into my business to help me achieve my organizational goals? And it's definitely within the, the rise in Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd protests within the last couple of years with COVID. COVID tore the mask off a lot of organizations because you had to deal with people in human form.
That's right.
Right. You had to really deal with the humanity of your workforce. And thankfully, a lot of those walls are not being built back up. COVID was a blessing in some corporate structure entity because it forced leaders to see their people as people. And now that they see them, they want to continue to see them and hear them. So That's a long answer to what you just asked about the importance of it. But DEI and B is now a strategic initiative in most organizations. And it's important for us who belong in those groups to
Right.
make sure that we keep their feet to the fire so that there is a strategic initiative around what's important to me, because what's important to me ultimately is important to the organization as well.
And you're right about HR wanting a seat at the table. And it's funny because all those groups that you named, when there's a problem, who do they go to? HR, the person that didn't have
Right.
the seat at the table. And I think also the DEI initiative made leaders more responsible for their actions, if I'm saying that right. And
Absolutely.
they had to because before the DEI came about, I was at a corporation and saw how things were done, right? And then when they made a point to create the DEI, you could put the person in there, and now you try to have that same behavior. You cannot. You can't.
Right.
Right? And it also made people kind of aware of their their judgments and things, and they were forced to look at things differently. You put the organization in your corporation, and then you hire the person to do their job. And I saw a situation where, well, no, I don't want you to touch that. And she was like,
Right.
no, this is what you hired me to do, and we're going to do it the right way. And yes, you got to be accountable for your action. Period. She didn't care who it was. You got to be accountable for your action. And because she was like that, you can see the environment start to change. And like you said, you had to now see me as an individual. Right? Not just a working person. You had to see me as an individual, like you said, deal with my humanity.
Well, and you change, and so now let me put on my other hat.
Okay.
As you know, I'm an illustrious member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, 34-year member. I have the honor of being the appointed director of strategic planning for the Southern region of our organization. So my job is to work with our regional director to help set strategy for the region and then put together a strategic plan, all that stuff. It's not fun. It's not exciting. I have a team that I work with that I lead, and I tell them, you must really like strategy if you're on this team, because this isn't the sexy work, right? I mean, this is sausage making a lot of times when it comes to developing strategy and whatnot, but you cannot change what you don't measure. And the only way to determine how the results of something that you measure is by assigning objectives to it, key performance indicators. And that way, okay, if I have a strategy, a strategic objective or an initiative, then what is it that we have to do in order to achieve that? And how do we measure that?
Right.
And so you can't change it. You can't address it if you haven't measured it to be able to say, okay, this is how we mitigate it. And so it's the same with DEI. If diversity, equity, inclusion is truly a strategic initiative, which means that this is important to you because this is going to help you sell more Coca-Cola, help you bring more people into your restaurants, help you sell more software, whatever. If it's a strategy that's tied to your operating goals and objectives, then we have to measure it. And how do we measure it? By putting somebody in place, making them accountable for it, and then having them continue to go out like I do with my team. Listen, every 3 months, we need to go measure these objectives. Where are we at? The goal was to be this far in 3 months. How close are we? Have we exceeded it? Great. Let's set a new goal. Have we not exceeded it? Then what do we have to do to get there? And so if it's important to you as the organization, then that's the putting the money where your mouth is. Right. And knock on wood, a lot of these organizations are doing it. And to pivot a little bit back to branding, when I'm talking to young people who know their brand and they go into these organizations and interview for these positions, they know to ask about, let me back up. I'm sorry. Organizations know to say, we really believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's important to us, and it's a strategic focus here at the organization. And in the past, we would say, okay, great. What's the pay? What's my job responsibility? Right. Young people now know enough to ask in that interview. So what does that mean? Tell me more about what does it mean that you have DE&I initiatives? What are some of those initiatives? How are you measuring them? How do I fit into that? And that's a win to me, because now, again, folks don't understand. If I'm bringing my whole self to this organization and you're telling me that this is important to you too, then what does that mean to you?
Right.
Give me some math around that so that I can help you measure if you're truly doing what you're telling me you're going to do and what's important to you.
Yeah. I had a boss that told me that when I first got hired with him. He said, if you can't manage it if you don't, you can't manage it if you don't measure it. It's always about you got to have the goals and you have to measure it. No data, if there's no data behind it, you're going to be lost. And I make that a sign and put it on my cubicle.
No data. It's like you always hear, the younger folks say pictures or it didn't happen, right? It's like, I heard, but if there's no picture, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
If there's no data behind it, then it's just, okay, it's an opinion, but data doesn't lie. So
yeah. And you cannot become, or you cannot be an effective leader without your goals and your measurements. You can't, you're just gonna be spinning a wheel.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about, you have the 9 signs of effective leadership. And we talked about, let's discuss the 9 core traits that effective leaders share, that you had in your book. Let's talk a little bit. Now, we're going to get people to get the book.
Well, I've already said I give it away, so it's like,
but they need to come. They need to come hear you speak to get it. So
right. I mean, you got to pay me somehow, right?
You got to pay them somehow. Okay, so let's talk about the 9 traits. I think I read through the book, and I think we can touch a little bit on each one, but I think they're very important.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll call them out, and then you can speak on it. How about that? Okay. Trait number 1, flexibility.
Rigidity kills leadership. So in order to be an effective leader, and this is the trait that I know, you have to be flexible. You have to be able to adjust and adapt to the situations that you find yourself in. And a lot of organizational leaders fail because they have this idea of what they want to accomplish. And as a linear thinker, as a process-oriented, B comes after A, it freaks me out if you throw Z ahead of there some way. I have to grapple with the fact that you've got to be able to deal with folks in real time, in real situations, to be able to pivot and adjust. So flexibility is one of those traits that you don't have to break, but you have to be able to bend sometimes in order to achieve organizational structure. That's
good. Trait number 2, low aversion to risk.
Yeah, this is that's an academic way of saying not afraid to try, right? You can't be afraid to try. Successful leaders they're not necessarily concerned about failing. They're concerned with not trying, right? I was telling somebody yesterday, one of the guys that I mentor at work, I said, if I fail, I want to fail fast, because that teaches me that didn't work. So don't do that again. But effective leaders have this. I didn't say they don't have an aversion to risk. They just have a low aversion. They're not afraid to try something to determine, okay, at least we know not to do that again. But yeah, it's just being able to manage appropriate risks. In my workshop, I pivot here and spend like 15, 20 minutes. I read a book, a consultant I used to work with years ago, Bill Treasurer, he wrote a book called Right Risks. Right risks. It's all about taking the right risk, measured risks, right? It's not, everything doesn't have to be cliff diving, diving headfirst into the unknown and faith. Sometimes you can measure what it takes to do something and whether or not it's worth taking that risk in order to achieve those accomplishments. So yeah, just not afraid to try.
Not afraid to try. Okay. Trait number 3, knowledgeable.
Yep. How can you effectively lead other people in an entity that you don't know what's going on or what happened before you got there? So you have to have at least a desire to know what you don't know.
Say that again, because that is key.
Why would you lead an organization, lead people, stand up in any role, and you have no knowledge of what happened before you got there, no knowledge of the industry that you're in, no knowledge of the organization or the people, the organizational talent around you? And so when I dig deeper into this, I talk about you need to be knowledgeable about trends, things that are happening outside of your entity, right? Because somehow that impacts what you're dealing with as well. But just a desire to know, and you don't have to be an academic and read, all these books and always have a book in your hand or something like that. But just the desire to know the things that you don't know is an admirable trait in leadership, effective leadership.
Trait number 4, visionary.
I talked about it earlier. Um, Vision is just the declaration of a desired state, right? It's just a recognition that I want to be that. I want to do that. I want to achieve that. And so leaders are very effective leaders are very adept at casting the vision, as they say in the old church, right? Being able to put it out there.
Mhm.
Some leaders are better at casting the vision than they are at managing and actually executing the vision. That's fine. There's a place for everybody, but you at least have to have that desire to know that there's more beyond where I am now. In fact, I always say visionaries are able to see beyond where they are now into
Mhm.
where they want to be.
Right.
And then they'll figure out how to get there. But you've got to be able to look above all that stuff and kind of chart a clear path and inspire the people behind you to say, I see where I think we need to go. Now we
Right.
need to gather up those resources and maximize the talents and the skills in order to get us there. But you got to be able to at least see beyond where you are now. That's visionary.
Yeah, yeah. And being able to be visionary, it keeps you motivated to get there.
100%.
100%. All right. Number 5, change resilient.
Yeah, that's like that lower version of risk. This is the one that I grapple with actively and regularly.
Mhm.
Nobody likes change, right? And so I always say, I don't like change. That's kind of like saying, puppies are cute and water's wet, right? Nobody likes change. Um, what I learned about myself is I don't like change because of the unknown. I don't like disorder. I don't like chaos. And so
Mhm.
once I started understanding, okay, it's not that I don't like change. I don't like the disorder and the chaos that comes with change. And so as soon as I started to reframe the way that I approached it, I'm a lot more change resilient. And this is something that leaders are effective in as well. It's not no, I mean, things are going to happen, right? Everything's going to come against you. You're always going to have to find a plan B, C, D, E, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to be willing, again, almost like that flexibility trait. You've got to be willing to acknowledge that I'm going to plan, but I've also got a plan for when the plan goes bad to be
Right.
able to pivot and say, I don't know what the end result is going to be, but I'm not going to get stuck in the fact that something changed, because that happens to a lot of us.
Mhm.
I won't get into all these different book recommendations, but I read a lot of, there's a lot of research out there that shows that there are people that are kind of those crisis people who
Mhm.
they fight change so much that they go up and down. And the most that they can hope for is things just be kind of static.
Mhm.
Life ain't like that. We've seen that
Right.
in the last couple of years. The new
Yeah.
normal is not new, right? It's not normal. And so there's effective folks who effective leaders have that ability to kind of ride the wave and deal with change as it comes.
My favorite change book is Who Moved My Cheese. I love
That's
that book.
it's a classic.
I
It is
love
a
that
classic.
book. I love that
Absolutely.
book. All right. Number 6, strategic.
I talked about it as well. And everything, in order to get something, I have a vision, right? I have a desire and all that stuff. There's got to be a strategy in place to help me achieve that organizational goal or that goal, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so effective leaders that I've been able to interact with and study are very strategic in the way that they do things. And
Mhm.
again, a strategic thinker is someone who says, okay, I know this is what has to happen. I don't know how to do this. So I need to find people who know how to do it. I need to find resources to help me achieve that goal. Okay, great. Then I have to put a plan together. Then I have to scrap that plan and put another plan together. And in the book, I talk about the driver's model and in the model that I use when I do strategic planning.
Mhm.
But it's just the concept of strategic thinkers, strategic leaders know that there's an answer to this math equation. I just have to figure out the work to
Right.
get to that answer. Visionaries like know the answer, they see the answer, and they want to leap right to the answer.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
Strategic thinkers say, I know there's an answer there, but I've got to create the math in order to support the answer so that I can stay there. Strategic people really believe in sustained success. Right? I don't want to just achieve. I
Yes.
want to reside in achievement. And so in order to do that, I've got to have a plan that gets me there and keeps me there.
Right. Sustained success.
Sustained success,
Success.
exactly.
Number 7, communicator.
Yeah, and this is one again. I usually I can spend a half day talking about communication because the automatic thing that comes to people's minds is the way that we talk to one another, right? The
Right.
way that I say things, or the way that I hear things, and
Mhm.
that's not the case. Communication is a full body exercise, right? We communicate a lot
Mhm.
by what we don't say, by our
Mhm.
actions, and so
Mhm.
it's more than just me being able to tell you what the vision is and to tell you how I'm a strategic thinker, to tell you how change resilient, etc. that I am. It's the way that I communicate through my actions as well. So really successful, effective leaders are able to communicate with anybody on any level, right? Because we have this habit of speak within our circles, right? There's corporate speak, there's government speak, there's army speak, there's
Mhm.
frat and soror speak, right? And you communicate real well within that silo,
Mhm.
but you can't communicate with somebody outside of your silo because they don't know your jargon, your communication.
Mhm.
And so effective communicators can communicate with anybody inside and outside of their sphere of influence or their organization.
Mhm.
And it's, again, beyond by just what I'm saying, but it's also in what I'm doing.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's powerful. Number 8, motivator.
Yeah, there's so much research and volumes that have been done about motivation and positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, etc. But I tell my clients all the time, you got to find the WIFM, right? If you've ever heard that expression,
Yeah,
WIIFM, right?
that's
You have
it.
to find the what's in it for me.
Mhm.
Everybody is motivated for some reason. Something makes people want to achieve whatever it is that you want them to achieve. You've got to
Right.
identify what you got to give them their, let them see themselves in
Mhm.
the organizational goals, in the organization's achievement, and then
Mhm.
align with that so that that motivates them to help you achieve those goals. And now the reality of it is, I want to be a servant leader. I want to be a participatory leader. I want to be a collaborative leader, right? Everybody wants to be Gandhi and MLK. Nobody wants to be that nobody wants to be that transactional leader, right? And
Right.
sometimes it's because the answer to the question is because I said so. So some of that motivation may be negative motivation. There's reward, risk and reward, right? Quid pro quo. The motivation is you're not going to be working here anymore. The
Mhm.
motivation is you're not going to be a member of this team. But we don't start there, right? We start with the with them, and then sometimes to the incessant why, it's because I said so, and because that's the organization's goals. But finding out what it is that motivates that person to achieve, and then aligning that with the organization's goals to help them get to where they need to get to.
Would you agree that in order to do that, that you have to um, spend time with that employee and really, really invest time with them?
Yes,
Because you won't know what motivates them if you don't really invest time in your employees.
one
The
hundred
best
percent.
leaders that I have worked for are the ones who found out a little bit about me, figured out what makes me tick, and then gave me tasks that I could be responsible for, right? And
Right.
know that I'm going to do the best that I can because you entrusted that task to me and you gave me some responsibility, and those are the best ones that I've worked for. But in order for them to do that, they had to spend time with me to figure out what tick or what makes me tick.
Imagine that. Imagine that if somebody just actually asked you, what is it that motivates you?
Mm-hmm.
They can actually learn that by just not assuming. And
Right.
so let me put on my research hat for a moment. So I've been in the sales for all my professional life. I took a detour right after I got my doctorate for 2 years to work in an HR consulting firm. And so we did a lot of research around performance management and all that other stuff. And if you recall, performance management used to be that once a year kind of checklist. Did you do your job? Did you not do your job? Show me evidence of it. Okay, great, you get a bonus. We've evolved from that performance management to what we consider more coaching and one-on-one interactions. And we encourage leaders. The best way to coach people is to understand what motivates them, right? And how do you do that? By talking to people. So it's, yeah, I know what you do. I know what your job title is and what your role is. But what do you like about what you do, right? I mean, what is it that you would change if you could? I just want to kind of get a better understanding. So when you try to unpack a little bit more, you get to understand people's motivations. Remember, we talked about pathology. The
Right.
pathology is why you are the way you are based
Mm-hmm.
on the experiences that you've been through. So once you kind of understand that, and it's just by talking to people. Now you can give assessments, right? And that's where all those discs and Myers-Briggs, you can give assessments to people and whatever. But if you just really sit down and find out what makes people, what inspires people to do the things that they do, and how you can, I don't want to say weaponize that because that's a negative connotation, but how you can make it make sense for them to employ that into what you want them to accomplish, then you're going to get to where you need to get to
Right.
100%. But it's you're changing a paradigm, right? This is
Right.
decades, this is millennia of human behavior that you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
change. So it's changing, but it's
That's
going to take
true.
some time.
That's true. That's true. And you have, like you say, you have some people that are just stuck in the old ways, and they still get the same results. And if you want something You want a different
Right.
result. You gotta change. You gotta do something different. But it sounds so simple, Dr. Bolden, but that what you said is so powerful. It is amazing what you find out when you just have a conversation with somebody. Just that simple.
Let me drop this in here. In leadership, I have a doctorate in leadership. I've read volumes and volumes of leadership. Leadership is the most studied subject in human history. Since the dawn of time, there has been studies about leadership. The research that I did was a drop in the bucket that has since disappeared. Right? I did my initial research 11 years ago. That research has been turned over now, and so many folks have added stuff to it, etc. It is the most studied subject in human history. Everybody knows it, but nobody knows it because we get this perception of leadership in this big grand thing. All leadership, a leader is someone who guides. That's it.
That's it.
That is the definition of leadership, is someone who guides. Now, leadership means you have command and authority or influence. So you may have a title, you may have a role, or you may just have you may be someone who has influence and authority with other people. I may not lead a team, but I have influence and authority within a room where if I say something, people listen to what I have to say. So we get this perception about leadership as being this big bear, this big, massive, gigantic, ornate, proper, studious thing. And leadership is really just a series of small gestures. It's just the little things that we do, the way that we interact with folks when we have that one-on-one interaction, those little things, listening to people, communicating in a more effective way, etc., that adds up. And I tell this to students too. I have the opportunity sometimes to speak to students that, don't think of leadership as this title, this thing, this big thing that everybody's trying to achieve. Think of it as these small gestures that folks remember in those interactions. And a lot of it is just getting to know what motivates you, what excites you about what you do. What do you wish could happen in your job that would make you even more excited to achieve in your job? Tell me more about that.
Right. Because you get more bang for your buck when you find out what motivates that individual and then allow them to operate in that which they enjoy and they're good at, instead of you putting them over here because you need this task filled. If you put people where they're comfortable in an environment that they like, they're going to flourish in it.
That's it. You're harnessing their natural abilities and gifts, and you're letting them develop them. And they'll come to you and say, I'm really good at this, but I could be better. Great. What does it take for you to be better at it? Employee development, professional development, classes, seminars, training, books, whatever, and just harnessing their ability and using it for the benefit of the organization.
Right.
And for them.
Let me ask you this. In your research and study, what is the main difference between a leader that, just like you said, okay, how can you be better? Okay, let's get you some more training. That particular leader versus one that you may say that to, and then you get the opposite reaction. What is the key difference between these two leaders?
That's the question I get asked all the time. I often get asked, are these really just nonsense? What's more important than the other? And then the other one is, well, what's the difference between a leader and an effective leader? And a leader, remember, I'm basic. I deal with words, right? So a leader is, again, someone who guides, right? You're a leader by appointment, anointment, whatever, election, job, whatever. That is your role. That is your title. That's your responsibility. The effective leader is the person who understands that I have a role, title, responsibility, but I'm going to leverage my talents. I'm going to leverage my experiences. I'm going to leverage my successes and my failures to maximize the opportunity that I have so that I can not only do the job that I'm supposed to be doing, but I can make other people better along the way as well.
Wow.
True leaders create other leaders.
Right.
That's it. True leaders truly understand that I'm successful when I replicate myself in other people, and they go and replicate themselves in other people, and so forth and so on. That's, servant leadership. We could spend another day talking about servant leadership, but that's the core of Greenleaf's theory on servant leadership, right? Leadership as a whole is you're looking at how can we achieve the organization's objectives and put people in place to help us get there. The servant leader says, how can we make sure that the people that are put in place are achieving their objectives? Because when they succeed, the organization is going to succeed. And so that's what's so important about effective leaders understand. And I may not have a role. Effective leaders know I'm borrowing this title, right? I may not be in this. I'm not going to die in this role, in this position. So when I moved away, I still want to have that authority or influence, and I want to replicate myself and replicate the good in other people as well. So that's, to me,
Right.
that's the biggest difference.
Ooh, you said it right there. Let me tell you, I had a conversation with someone, and I told them, I said, where is the most powerful position in a room? Is it in the front or in the back? And the person said in the front. And I said, no, it's in the back. Because if you were an effective leader and you were cloning yourself and you were serving other people, those that you have served, they should be in the front of the room and you should be in the
100%.
back cheering them on. I said, no, the most powerful position in the room is in the back. And that just came to me, but you just confirmed that I was right.
Well,
But it makes sense to me. You know what I mean?
Well, remember what I said, and I know you getting ready to close, as my old Baptist preacher, childhood preacher was that. But remember I told you, when we first started, I said I understood when I clicked on what my purpose was, that's when I started to shift and operate in a whole different way. I used to think that my purpose was to be on the stage in the front. And it's so ironic because my work puts me in forums like this where you see my face and hear me. But like I was joking with you, my job is to work with other people, not to necessarily be the face of that people see. And so once I know that my purpose is not to be the all-star. I know that without a shadow of a doubt. My purpose is to coach the all-stars. I'm the person that's in the background cheering you on and holding you up. And it's when I understood that, it freed me up in the work that I do because I'm not hoarding, right? Effective leaders don't hoard their talents and their abilities because, okay, I'm going to keep some of this because I got to get to the front and get on the mic and do this, or I have to be the one that's on the marquee. Effective leaders, we pour it all out because we recognize that it's going to hit better, and then you're going to pour it out into other people. And so when that's why it's so important to know your purpose, your vision, your mission. When you understand that, you can operate freely because I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. The better you look, the better I feel because I know that's my purpose. I'm doing my job.
Right. Your vision, your purpose, and your mission. You gotta know it. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to leave, or any just last nuggets that you want to leave for the viewer? Because I made sure we got it in. There's a lot of information packed in this interview, and I'm gonna go back. I can't take notes and run the show, so I'm gonna go back and revisit it and take my notes. But is it a last nugget that you want to leave with the viewers?
I'll just leave you with what I tell people all the time. With regard to what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to be this great leader? What can I do? I tell folks, assess where you are, right? Assess where you are right now. Do an honest, true understanding of where am I right now? Where are the gaps at? Where do I need? I know where I want to get to, but where am I right now? So do an honest assessment. And then the next thing is to align yourself with people who are doing the thing that you want to do. If you see people who've succeeded in your vision, in the area that you see your purpose leading you to, then study them, right? Talk to them. Figure out what it is that they're doing. So align yourself with effective people and then execute. Don't wait, right, until everything's perfect before you go out and say, okay, now I'm going to start operating in my purpose because I've studied hard and I've followed people and I've watched and I've practiced. Now I can execute. Fail fast, like I said, just execute. Just do it and get those failures out of the way and learn from them, because the ninth trait that we didn't talk with is about being a learner. Effective leaders are learners, right? They learn from every loss and every success. They learn something from it. So learn, so assess, align, and execute. That's what I like to leave folks with.
Assess, align, and execute. If someone wanted to contact you, your information is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. What is the best way to contact you? And I left off your website. I knew it was something else.
It looks like the email address. It almost looks like it's TonyBoldenSpeaks.com is the website. The email is Tony@TonyBoldenSpeaks. Facebook is and Instagram are Tony Bolden Speaks. Twitter is Tony Bolden Speak, no S. So it's hard not to find me if you don't want to, if you're trying to get in touch with me. But hit the website. My phone number's there as well. But yeah, just LinkedIn. LinkedIn is Tony Bolden Atlanta. I get a lot of folks who reach out to me through LinkedIn as well. But yeah, just reach out and let's just have a conversation. Like I said, I'm not a formal coach, but I'm always willing to share my perspective or some information with folks who might be interested. So that's the easiest ways.
You say you're not a formal coach, but to me you are.
Well, then I need to be charging then. So maybe that should be the 23 plan.
Dr. Bolden, thank you so much for coming on tonight's show. I really enjoyed our interview tonight, but most importantly, I've enjoyed the other conversations that we have had.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to have you back
me.
on. We'll have to have you back on in the new year to talk about a different topic, still with, effective leadership. But like you said, it's so many different routes that we could go with effective leadership. But this was very good. I learned a lot. And I know the viewers enjoyed the interview tonight. Now you hold on, don't go anywhere. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We will see you next Wednesday, same time, same station. Good night, everybody. Wow.